Football is not that far away, as we just explained to you. Our man,
hey,
Coach Shannon Griffith, how are you, sir?
little technical difficulties this morning, but able to get them resolved.
Never a problem for a pro like you, man. Hey, Indiana football is just continuing to bring guys in, and now they're not bringing in 4 and 5 stars, which has not been the case. Although I will say that even though during Tom Allen's regime, he was able to increase the recruiting, but they just weren't able to do. They got him here, but they weren't able to
Develop.
to squeeze the juice out of the orange once they got him here. And that is not going to be the case now. I feel confident in saying, but they kind of have to start over, even though Curt Cignetti has a great track record. He obviously is doing him and his staff, I should say, doing a great job getting these guys, but it's still a lot of what I would call blue collar players, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I believe he's getting kids that he knows that he can work with. They can develop into very good football players. I don't think there's any of them that he thinks have to come in right away and be productive, positional players. There's always that one or two that, will surprise you in a recruiting class that will jump to the forefront. But I think for the most part, his class is going to be a solid class. And I think it may be a little bit above average compared to where they have been. I do believe they've got one 4-star commit, which I'm not sure they've had in a long time. And hey, our boy Juju's still out there wearing an IU t-shirt, throwing the ball around, and I'm hearing Auburn is out of the picture now, that they are no longer in consideration. So that would, logically leave Indiana and whatever happens with him at USC.
Well, and ironically, which doesn't make sense, but I had heard it was down to Indiana and Auburn previously, which doesn't make a lot of sense since
right.
USC is where he's committed to, and it's kind of like a home base doing this stuff. So, honestly, things aren't going great for Lincoln Riley at USC. He's kind of at a crossroads that if he doesn't have a good year, his seat will start warming up. Well,
it was warm last year until he fired his defensive coordinator about halfway through the season. And that has kind of always been Lincoln Riley's Achilles heel, that the teams that he's had, defense seemed to be optional half the time. But I don't know if Juju's reclassifying himself, and for 25 has anything to do with USC or not. Maybe they don't want him to come out in 25. They want him to come back, come out in the 26, class, 27 class. I don't know, but yeah, it's an odd situation. But
no, what an odd situation is, we're talking about a recruit that involves Indiana and USC football. That's odd.
Well, we've had some conversations where IU has surprised the college landscape with getting a highly rated commit, mostly out of the portal, that they've gotten to choose them over other big time programs. So, yeah, I mean, I think everything is locked and loaded for this class to be above average. They're trying to add a little icing on the cake, so to speak. But really, I think their class is all but done. Rather, I don't know if there's anyone else out there that they would take commitments from until they hear from their top guys.
Well, it's because they're already up to either, I don't even know now, 19 or 20. I've lost count.
Yeah, it was somewhere around I think it was like 21 or 22 that they've, where they're at with their commitments.
And that's getting at the top of where you want to be You don't want to be, I don't know if people understand, you don't want to be too high. You want to make sure these classes are balanced.
Yeah, you don't want to be above it. Then you get into having to juggle things with your own roster and who's here, who's not here. And, how do I pick up a scholarship here and there? And I think he's one of those guys that will always want to keep one or two in his back pocket that maybe wants to award a walk-on that has, impressed them as a staff, may offer, a kid that deserves it, however they want to do it. But yeah, I think they're ready to go. I think we're really ready to put that stuff to bed and really start focusing in on fall camp here starting in a few weeks. But, Big Ten Media Days here at the end of the month.
Yeah. And I was talking earlier in the week with maybe Cal Nedrip, I believe, but as far as recruiting right now, with all the positives, Purdue still owns the state. Between Indiana and Purdue, Purdue is still more successful recruiting high school talent than Indiana is at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But neither are great with say the top 10 players in the state. Right. Those guys all go elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Now I include Notre Dame and elsewhere in that category, but yeah, it's either Notre Dame or LSU or Ohio State or Michigan, et cetera, on down the line. And I see as soon as next season, Indiana making inroads and a dent into that. Now, if they were to say do something crazy and land a Juju Lewis, that changes the game instantaneously, because wide receivers, offensive linemen, just that will draw. He will be the honey that draws the flies.
Yeah. Anytime you get a high profile recruit, it ultimately elevates you on the landscape, especially with high school kids that are still out looking, especially with the class of 26 and 27 that are really on the clock at this point in time. So we'll just have to see what happens. Purdue, I don't know. For me, Purdue has always been one of those schools that has always done well in recruiting. I don't know why there's a big differential between Purdue and Indiana.
They produced a ton of talent they probably produce way more talent that has gone to the NFL than Indiana. That's
well,
pretty confident statement, I'd say.
Yeah, and Tiller had some great classes, when he was in control of things, and there was a lot of things that
went on as quarterback U for a long time,
right? And what they did offensively had a tendency to attract a lot of talent too, the basketball on grass type of concept that he would employ. But I've heard coaches, and I remember this back in the day, that the biggest hindrance for Indiana when it came to the recruiting game was that, Purdue was off a major highway, 65, easy to get to, and Indiana was off 31, and they were 2 hours or hour and a half from the nearest major airport, which made things a little bit complicated when they were recruiting. Now, with the completion of 69 South, those excuses are gone. But yeah, I think as time evolves, we'll see. I thought there was a year there or two that Kevin Wilson had kind of flipped the script in state versus Indiana Purdue talent, but overall excited about what they've got going, what they got on paper. I'm just ready to go with the season. The old coach's itch is starting to get tickled a little bit here and there, because even though I haven't coached for a few years, it never stops when the month of July hits. It for whatever reason, just seems like you're ready to jump off a tall building at a single bound,
Absolutely. And I've been looking at the schedule for Indiana and talked about that ad nauseum. And Purdue, on the other, while Indiana has a schedule that I think is a dream for any first year coach.
Absolutely.
Purdue, on the other hand, has a nightmare of a schedule for any coach, much less a second-year coach, as they open up at home against Indiana State, but game 2, even though it's a home game, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Then they have to travel to Oregon State. So that's 2 out of your first 3 weeks. Game 4 is a home game against Nebraska, which Nebraska is on the come, man. They're rising. Then they travel to Wisconsin. They come back, play no, they don't. Then they go to Illinois, which that's probably a coin toss to me. They have a home game against Oregon. Again, that's not going to be easy. Dan Lanning has been in place out there, so he's got things going. Now they have a home game against Northwestern. That should be, compared to anything else, a breath of fresh air. Then you got to go to Ohio State and host Penn State, travel to Michigan State, and then Indiana.
Yeah.
That is a brutal schedule.
Who did they make mad? Who did they piss off at the Big Ten office?
It's like, did someone take the name Purdue or Indiana, erase it, and write Purdue in it?
You said 2 games there that I would be concerned as a head coach. Wisconsin or Nebraska and Wisconsin back to back. 2 teams that will literally beat the living crap out of you because they like to hit, and that's their makeup as a team. Physical football teams back to back weeks always concerns you because you've got to come out of those games healthy, and if you don't, you're in trouble with what's left on the schedule. So yeah, that is I think I saw them ranked pretty high in terms of, their schedule. Their schedule rating this year in the Big Ten was like in the top 5, I believe. Toughest schedule in the Big Ten. On the other hand, Indiana's was like 17th. Indiana has to make a lot of hay in that first, 6 weeks of the season. They get a bye week before they play Nebraska. That gives them 2 weeks to prepare, which is always great. And from a football standpoint, getting a 2-week period to prepare for your next opponent. But their biggest test will be on the road at UCLA after, FIU and Western Illinois. And we'll see there where this ball may end up bouncing for the rest of the season. I know there's been some things that have come out in terms of, expectations or ratings of this year for Indiana. There's a lot of 6 and 6s. There's a lot of, 6-6 overall, 3 and 6 in the Big Ten, and then them getting a bowl bid. I don't know. I just think they're better than that type of 6 and 6 than what I'm seeing or being predicted. I do think this is a team that could ultimately maybe knock off somebody they're not supposed to. I just get that feeling that's going to happen with this team and Coach Cignetti and the way he runs things.
Well, by knocking off someone they're not supposed to me, that teams that would fall under that category would be in order of the schedule. I guess you'd have to start with UCLA because that to me is a winnable game, but I'm saying that without having seen this team in totality, without knowing much about UCLA other than they're all brand new as well.
Yeah, perception will tell you that.
And then, though, Northwestern, even though it's at home, that's going to be a tough game. Washington will be a tough game, but at Michigan State, that should be under the category of winning a game you're not supposed to win. Michigan is absolutely a game that they're not supposed to win, even though that game's at home. So,
yeah, that's what I'm talking. Like a team like Michigan, let's take them for instance. They're coming off a great season under Jim Harbaugh. Everybody's left essentially from that squad. Jesse Minter left and went to to the NFL with Jim. They brought in Martindale, who's a heck of a defensive coach, who's been many years in the NFL. But there's a team that if there's ever a year to get them, this is it, because they've had changeover. They've had a little bit of, some controversy from last year that's still lingering around. I'm still waiting to see what the Big Ten does or doesn't do. You know, where did all this thing with the Big Ten go in terms of the cheating of putting a person in the stands for Michigan and, you know, stealing signals? Where did all that fall out? You know, we haven't even got a report back on that one yet, but this is a time of year that I think that game, if it would be a good one to surprise everybody with. And that's the type of team that, you know, on the schedule that if you turns a 6-6 season into, you know, 8-3, because it's probably worth 2 wins if you beat them.
Yeah. And for Purdue, man, I'm looking at I think being generous, 5-7 is being generous for them. And I don't mean it because of you know, poor coaching or poor playing. It just, they have a brutal schedule. Just looking at this brutal schedule, I'm like, man, all right, if I go 5-7, I'm being generous because I'm giving them a win over someone that they're not supposed to beat, really. Because you know, looking down their schedule, it's just not, it doesn't offer the opportunities. They end the season with back-to-back games on the road, and the 2 games, their last month of their season is at Ohio State, home against Penn State, on the road at Michigan State, and on the road at Indiana.
Yeah.
That's the last month of their season. So you've already had a tough season and a tough schedule, but let's end it like that. So Purdue is.
Yeah, I mean, they could come in those last 2. Yeah, they could come in the last 2 weeks of that season with a ton of kids out just because of injury and things of that magnitude based upon who they've played up to that point. Coach Walters, I mean, they've kind of gone under the radar on a lot of things this year, even recruiting. I don't think they've, you know, I'm not saying they've had a great year in the recruiting ranks, but I think they've put a pretty decent class together over the last couple of years. If they can ever find an offense that is a little bit more consistent and a defense that plays to the level that he likes to have a defense play, Purdue's one of those teams that all of a sudden can be a very tough team to beat. But with what you said in terms of their schedule, this year is not the year to be thinking that they're going to be an 8-3 type of football team based upon their schedule. It's like I said, it's one of the top 5, I think, in the Big Ten, if not within the top 3.
Hello, everybody. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and thank you for enjoying our content and videos. And make sure you hit that subscribe and notifications toggle so you don't miss out on anything, whether it's Indiana Hoosiers, the Boilers, the Colts, the Pacers, Indiana high school action, whatever's happening in sports. We're trying to bring it all to you, and make sure you don't miss out on a thing. Again, hit the subscribe button for us. Helps us out a ton. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.